Alvarez Technology Group's CEO Luis Alvarez joins us this week to discuss some breaking news from Barracuda, Enable's spinoff from SolarWinds, and the 2021 summer reading list with ChannelPro's Colleen Frye, plus a special guest interview with Joseph Brunsman on Cyberinsurance tips, tricks, and trends. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 191, Close Encounters of the Insurance Kind. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 191. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for the folks like you. And who are you? You're the MSPs, you're the MSSPs, because that extra S makes a difference and changes your whole job somehow. You're the VARs, you're the integrators, you're the IT consultants. You are the folks that do technology things with other businesses. And if you are not one of those people, if you are in fact a waiter at Applebee's, God bless you. We need more good waiters at Applebee's. But keep us in your ear, learn a little bit about the IT channel, and who knows, you might get a better job someday. It might be a lot of fun. Joining me each and every week is the man of the hour, the man who rocks black on black with slicked hair. He's got his own motif, and we love it. It's super stylish. Executive editor Rich Freeman.
Greetings, everybody, coming to you from within what is left of the heat dome.
Yeah, no, it was like 108 degrees or something like that in Seattle, right?
It merely got, at least in my part of the city here, like at SeaTac, it probably was 108, 109, but in downtown Seattle, where I am right now, it got up to 105. So
when you moved to Seattle, you didn't realize you were moving to the Sahara Desert.
Nobody warned me about this, which is why I don't have air conditioning.
So that'd be brutal. So what did you do to stay cool when you had the heat up like that?
Well, of course, it is impossible to stay cool, but I had a pretty good sized fan just pointed right at me all day, and it helped a great deal.
Wow, that's crazy. So now that was like record breaking, I would assume, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And before this, I'm sure you saw it on the news. What was the hottest temperature recorded in Seattle prior to this heat wave?
You know what? I didn't see that. I know it's crossed. I believe they said this is only the third time in recorded meteorological history that it's gotten above 100. But I forget what the high mark was before that.
It may have been the 120s, but that was when the continents were the big super Pangea thing, and right. Seattle was near the equator. Maybe we're going back to that. Maybe we'll see dinosaurs in Seattle in the near future. You never know. But anyway, good to have you here. It's been a week. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. In fact, Rich, we are not alone. We have we have a guest host with us today. We also have another special guest with us, so I'm super excited. Lots of fun stuff for ChannelPro Weekly this week. The first one, he's the president and CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, a technology services provider that delivers security, Internet of Things, and managed information technology solutions. His company embraced IoT solutions early on, well before the rest of the IT service industry, providing its clients with consultation and integration services. That's led his company in many, many interesting directions. Please welcome back to the show, Mr. Luis Alvarez. Welcome, Luis.
Thank you, Matt. I'm excited to be back, excited to have the conversation, and just participate in your antics. It's just makes my day complete.
I try to make everybody's day complete with my antics, and it's awesome that you're back. I think the last time we had you on was for our New Year's special, which was a lot of fun. That was a great show. But you've also been a guest host before, well back in June of last year. So it's been about almost a year to the day since you've been on. June 25th was when you were last here. Talked about a lot of things that day. But for those who happen to miss that show, Luis, tell us more about you and what you do.
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm president and CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, or as we call it, ATG. We're based in Central California, Salinas area, which is, if you're not familiar with California, it's about 50 miles south of Silicon Valley, but it's very different. It's agricultural and hospitality driven area. So we do a lot of work with ag companies and helping them implement technology. That's where we got our IoT chops, and have now really started to do a lot of more work around cybersecurity, especially with public agencies. We do a lot of work with small cities and other governmental agencies, and they're now starting to really ramp up their cybersecurity awareness, as well as enhancing what they're doing there. But we've been here for 20 years. This is actually our 20th year in business, and we're still going strong and continuing to build on what we've built in the past.
Excellent. And and your IoT kind of chops that you were talking about has kind of led you for one of the things that you're really known for, and that's a lot of your work in the cannabis industry that's grown out of California. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, as many of you know, California legalized recreational use, as we call it, as opposed to adult use, cannabis back in 2016. It took a couple of years to actually get the process going. So it actually became legal to buy without any sort of prescription on January 1st, 2018. And so we had already been working with a number of small cannabis dispensaries and grow operations. And as you know, once the California approved recreational use, it was just basically like the wild, wild west. And in particular in Monterey County, where we're located, because there's a number of, at the time, there were a number of greenhouses that were being, that had gone unused for a number of years. And California approved indoor grow, which meant you had to have a greenhouse, a warehouse, someplace to grow it indoors. And so we had this mad rush, a gold rush, if you will, to this area from companies all over and investors all over the world wanting to get into it. And they needed to refurbish these old greenhouses, and technology was the top of their list because they wanted to, as much as possible, use automation, because otherwise it's a very labor intensive process, and they just wanted to do what they could to minimize labor. And so we became the go-to experts for these cannabis companies that were implementing surveillance systems so that they could be compliant with the rules and regulations of growing in California, as well as, you know, the typical IT stuff that you would have to build an infrastructure that supports IoT. And when we talk about IoT for greenhouses, we're talking about things that control temperature, control water flow, control the nutrient flow to the plants, can you know, actually operate automatically the windows in the greenhouse to regulate temperature. So there was a lot of work that we had to put into that, and fortunately we had been doing a lot of that work with other, you know, the normal ag industry. So we were able to transfer that knowledge quite easily into the cannabis space, and we're still very heavily involved there, doing ongoing support and expansion. The pandemic was very good to the cannabis industry. Apparently, while we were sitting at home pretending to work, we were doing a lot of edibles. So they did really well, and so they're now taking a lot of that money that they made and reinvesting and growing their business, and we're part of that growth. So it's kind of a good place to be.
Yeah, and you say you're doing a lot of work now around cybersecurity. Tell us a little about what you're doing there.
Yeah, well, you know, cyber, especially since the pandemic, has become a big issue. You know, you don't like to, you know, build on the woes of other people, but the reality is things like the SolarWinds hack, the Exchange vulnerabilities, the massive growth of ransomware attacks have really rattled a lot of people, especially in the SMB space where we play. And whereas before, you know, we started the cybersecurity journey, quite frankly, about 5 years ago, when we recognized that it was something that was real, and really cybersecurity meant more than just endpoint protection and backup and firewalls. It really meant about implementing a cybersecurity framework that addressed every element within that organization, including, you know, awareness training and things like policies and procedures. So we were early adopters of that, and that helped us because we were educating our clients as we got educated. And like everything in our world, in our industry, it's rare that somebody's going to just say, yes, I want to buy the latest and greatest without really understanding what the value, what the benefit is. And because we'd spent so many years educating our clients on the importance of cybersecurity, when kind of the dam burst in the middle toward the end of last year, they were coming to us saying, okay, what do we need to do to protect ourselves? Because, you know, we've heard of businesses getting hit. We heard of, you know, a large agricultural company that got hit with ransomware and had to shut down production for 2 weeks while they dealt with it. And we can't afford to do that. If we get shut down for a week, we're out of business. So we got even more smart on it. And so we implemented an enhanced security package that we now offer as part of our managed services. And it's gotten a lot of really good traction. People we're getting a lot of referrals, especially around government agencies, like I said, where they are, typically they'll have if they have any IT staff, it's going to be a small one or two people, and they just don't have any cybersecurity knowledge available to them, and they can't afford to go out and hire somebody just for that one specific purpose. So they hire us, and we've been doing really well. It's the fastest growing part of our business this year.
That's fascinating stuff, and good that business is growing. It seems like if you're in cybersecurity right now, you're probably doing pretty good if you know what you're doing.
If you know what you're doing, yeah. And I work really hard. Rich knows this. I'm very willing to share my knowledge and the lessons that we've learned with my peers in the industry, because I think we have to do that. We can't kind of silo ourselves away, and I think it's important that we all get smart, and as MSPs, as VARs and technology professionals, that we really understand how to protect ourselves, because we're big targets out there, as we've heard over and over and over again, as well as how we can protect our clients better so that they don't get victimized. And I'm willing to share whatever knowledge I can to make sure that we do a better job of it. Well,
fantastic. Well, we're really glad to have you here joining us again on the show today. And I do want to refer people back to episode 151, where we did talk a lot more in depth about your background and kind of what you do. So I really encourage folks to go check that out. And Rich, I'm also excited to say that we also have another special guest here today. Kind of a surprise. We were going to have her for one segment, but now we got her here kind of for the whole top half of the show here. And it's our good friend and peer and colleague, managing editor, Colleen Frye is here. Welcome, Colleen.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Rich. Hey, Louis.
Glad to have you here. You've been on several times, but for those who may not be familiar with what you do here at ChannelPro, why don't you tell them a little bit about you and what you do?
All righty. So I'm the managing editor. I write, I edit, I work with freelancers. I occasionally grace your podcast with my presence, and also do moderate sessions at our live conferences.
So yeah, and one of the more interesting parts of that job description is you have to put up with me, and you should get a special bonus for that, I think.
Oh, always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
Always fun. Well, it's always great to have you on. And usually when Colleen appears, it means that we've got a new segment of our ChannelPro Book Club. So we've got a 2021 summer reading list we're going to dive into a little later on in the show. So I can't wait for that segment. So Colleen, thanks for being here for that. But of course, we do have a little bit of news to cover. Not a lot of news to cover, but we've got something breaking we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Enable. We're going to talk about the book club. We got a cool interview coming up with Joseph Brunsman from the Brunsman Advisory Group. We're going to talk a little about Cyberinsurance. It's a fascinating conversation that we're going to have. So make sure you stay on for that. And of course, we'll have some other stuff along the way and some fun. Can't wait. Let's dive in. Rich, breaking news. What do we got?
Yeah, I was kind of counting on you getting the breaking news theme in there, so that's good. We've got that taken care of. And this news is so fresh, in fact, that it broke 2 hours ago as we record this, and I have not written about it yet. I have an interview coming up just a little bit later today with one of the companies involved. So by the time people are hearing this, I'll have a story up, but it haven't written it yet. The news is that Barracuda Networks has entered into a definitive agreement to buy SKOUT Cybersecurity. And a number of things interesting about this. One in particular that I'll call out just quickly for folks who are not, everyone's probably familiar with Barracuda. They do cybersecurity, obviously, and backup and so on. SKOUT, I suspect a lot of people know, but if you don't, basically that is they call themselves a cyber as a service vendor. Basically, it's an extended detection and response, an XDR platform specifically for MSPs. It comes with a 24/7 SOC, so it's sort of like an outsourced XDR option for MSPs who don't have that kind of expertise in-house. And so what's kind of interesting about, I will learn more later today about what's going on here, but I think it's pretty safe to say that from Barracuda's perspective, they really kind of needed to get into XDR. There are probably no hotter 3 letters in cybersecurity right now than XDR. Gartner and other analysts have been saying this is the big new thing. For folks who are not familiar with XDR, you've probably heard of EDR, endpoint detection and response. If you take that endpoint set of inputs and you add inputs from the firewall and online and all the other places where potentially relevant information is coming from, you pool all that together, you start doing correlation across these different sources, you now have extended detection and response. Big market, fast growing. Over the course of this year, we've talked about solutions from Fortinet and from Trend Micro. All the big names are getting into XDR if they're not there already. And now Barracuda has kind of taken what I assume is sort of a shortcut approach, as opposed to developing their own XDR solution. They've acquired a company that does that and that has a managed security component to what they do as well, so that there is a services, a managed threat response kind of element to the offering that they can sell to and through their MSP partners as well. So if nothing else, this is obviously an interesting development. If you're a Barracuda partner or a SKOUT partner, it's also further evidence of something that has popped up on the podcast over the course of the year, that XDR is where it's at in cybersecurity these days.
You said it's a very important 3 letters. I also want to point out that it's a lie, because the word extended starts with an E, not an X. So it should be EDR again. And that would have been really funny, because it'd been super confusing to figure out what people are talking about between EDR and EDR.
Yeah.
Like, not that EDR. We're talking about the other EDR.
We're the other EDR.
Yeah. Yeah. EDR with an asterisk or something at the end.
I love it. Anything to make it harder for people to understand. So this wasn't, I think, expected, right? This is, we didn't see the writing on the wall with this particular announcement, right, Rich?
That is correct. When I woke up this morning, I had no idea this was coming, and I learned about it an hour before we started recording.
So another merger, another acquisition. Louis, what do you think? Are you into? Do you have Barracuda? Do you use Barracuda stuff or SKOUT?
No, we don't use Barracuda, but I'm not surprised. I mean, we're a ConnectWise shop, and ConnectWise owns another vendor, Perch, that does very similar work. And we've been using Perch as our kind of XDR to help us do a lot of the work that we just don't have the capacity to do. Even though we're larger than most MSPs, we still don't have a SOC that can look at every alert and do all the correlations. And a lot of this stuff gets done now by machine learning or AI, so that all these data feeds go into it, and then they can decide, okay, this is something that's actionable, and then their SOC takes a look at it and then says, okay, well, this isn't that big a deal, or this is a false positive, or there's nothing here to see. But then at the end of the day, if there is something, they'll escalate it to our team, and then we can investigate it further. And it's helped us find instances of things like, users having software on their systems that they shouldn't have had. And even though we have protections to keep that from happening, somehow it got on that PC, but that PC was now phoning home or doing something it shouldn't have been doing, and we detected it not because of what was on the endpoint, but because of what was on the network. So the consolidation of all of these security vendors under bigger umbrellas by the PSA owners is not surprising, because they want to be kind of a one-stop shop, I think, for their partners, and they're looking to kind of compete in that space. And like Rich mentioned, Barracuda probably was desperate to try to include that piece into their stack, because otherwise partners might start looking at at other providers that compete with it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Rich, did they have a price tag announced with this, or are those details all kind of forthcoming?
Or they're probably never coming. Actually, there was no price tag put in the press release, and my guess is that information will remain private. But you know, I'll say two quick things about that. First of all, Barracuda is owned by Thoma Bravo, which is one of the huge private equity firms out there. So money was not an issue. And security companies that have been selling recently have been selling for large numbers. Proofpoint was acquired by it may have been by Thoma Bravo, but Proofpoint was acquired for over $12 billion earlier this year, which was kind of a stunning number to me. So yeah, I'll bet they did okay at SKOUT.
Colleen, if you were going to guess how many dollars it went for, what would your guess be?
I'm not sure I can calculate that many zeros, Matt. But...
Well, let's calculate it in Subway sandwiches. So how many Subway sandwiches did they spend on SKOUT? What do you think?
Well, the
Or
folks,
6 inches.
the folks at SKOUT will never go hungry. How about that?
It's yeah, many of those chicken teriyaki, those are good. Louis, what's your favorite Subway sandwich? Just out of curiosity.
I tend to stick to the kind of traditional stuff, right? So the turkey and the chicken sandwich. I'm not a big experimenter when it comes to my sandwiches. Now, talk to me about fried chicken, and there I can wax poetic for days and days and days.
I see a fried chicken question coming in 5 questions later on in the show. Colleen, what's your favorite Subway sandwich? Are you a fresh and fit menu kind of gal, or do you like to explore the dark side of the steak and cheese?
I'm a creature of habit at Subway. I usually get the turkey on wheat with lettuce, tomato, and pickles and onions.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm thinking lunch tomorrow might be Subway. Rich, what's your favorite Subway sandwich?
Very similar. I mean, I will always wind up getting either the ham, the turkey, or the turkey and ham when I'm feeling crazy. And I will always shell out for the guacamole, the avocado as well.
Nice. See, so here in the Chicagoland, I can go to Subway and I can get jardinara on a sub, which you get most people, like every Subway, like in different locations, you can get different stuff. Like I can't get avocado here. I get guac, but I can't get like raw avocado, but I can get jardinara, which is like spicy peppers and stuff. So like my sandwich from Subway is, I'll go through the different meat varieties. Like it can be turkey, it can be, I don't really like the roast beef, so I don't get that one, but they're like spicy Italian's really good or whatever. But my thing is like, I put it into the topping area and I just load it up with everything they got, top it with hot peppers. Oh, that's good eating, Rich. I'm telling you, that is good stuff. So next week on, I should say, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Subway. No, I'm just kidding. We'll talk about other sandwich shops later, just so it's fair and people don't think Subway paid us to go into that. But very good stuff. We'll be excited to learn a little bit more about this SKOUT acquisition. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll talk about it and see it on the site when you got a little bit more detail from then. But let's move on to our next story. And it starts by saying it's official. And we should just stop there and then have everybody wonder what's official and go to the site. But actually, it's about N-able. They're on their own. What does that mean, Rich?
Well, you know what? This is not terribly surprising news, right? Because last year, in conjunction with the publication of some quarterly results, SolarWinds announced that they were considering a spinoff of SolarWinds MSP, as it was called at that time, as an independent business that would be publicly traded in the stock market as well. And the idea was they were talking it over with the board and investors, and they were going to make up their mind. But really, I think we've known since last year that this was coming. It was really more a question of when. And as recently as a couple of weeks ago, in fact, when you and me and Colleen were in Dallas for ChannelPro's most recent event, the company that is now known as N-able, they rebranded very late in 2020. That company it used to be SolarWinds MSP, they're N-able now. They were hosting their big annual partner event. And even then, 2 weeks ago, when this question came up, they said, we are contemplating a spinoff. And then what happened last Friday, surprisingly late in the day, is there was the official statement from SolarWinds that they would in fact be spinning off Enable as an independent business that will be listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol Enable, N-A-B-L. This gets a little confusing and isn't all that important, but July 12th is the record date. Officially, July 12th is when Enable becomes its own company. July 19th is when the stock implications of that transaction take place. Everybody who owns or everyone, SolarWinds shareholder will get 1 share of Enable for every 2 shares of SolarWinds that they own on the distribution date, which is July 19th. We know that SolarWinds actually, after this transaction, will no longer have anything to do with Enable. This was a question that came up during this partner conference a couple of weeks ago. One of the partner attendees asked, and there will no longer be any connection between SolarWinds and Enable after the spinoff happens. Although with that said, the aforementioned Thoma Bravo owns a piece of SolarWinds still, and that means they're going to own a piece of Enable going forward. I'm not sure how big a piece. What does this mean for partners in the short term? Probably very little. I think the question, the thing everyone will be watching out for is how big a distraction is this spinoff and becoming an independent business for Enable. And this is something that I've asked John Pagliuca, the president of Enable, who I'm sure will become the CEO of Enable very shortly, about. And he said, we've been through this. The leadership team at this company has been through this kind of thing before. We know that's a danger. We feel confident we know how to deal with it. We'll see if they can kind of live up to those good intentions. Longer term, the message Enable has been delivering for many months now, though, is we are not part of this larger company with a larger agenda. We're going to be 100% focused on managed services and MSPs and the products and the services that they need. We're going to be able to move faster on acquisition opportunities and product roadmap, et cetera. So more focus on MSP, and they believe that will be a good thing for their MSP partners.
Even when SolarWinds MSP was under SolarWinds, because they were bought right at one point and brought in. Who were they before they were SolarWinds MSP?
So SolarWinds MSP was officially launched in 2016. So in 2013, SolarWinds buys a company called Enable.
Enable, right? Yeah.
Which is one of the early pioneering names in RMM. So 2013, SolarWinds buys Enable. 2016, they bought a cloud-based RMM company called LogicNow, and put those two businesses together into a unit, a division of the company called SolarWinds MSP.
And then they changed the name back to Enable, they're spinning it off. Now I have to assume that, but when they were under the same umbrella, like SolarWinds wasn't heavily involved with SolarWinds MSP, right? They were kind of different things.
Well, I mean, so SolarWinds MSP was the piece of SolarWinds that was focused on the managed services community. The rest of the company was more focused on corporate IT. And that, that's the part of the company that is best known for Orion, which widely used IT management platform for corporate environments. That's the one that got hacked and involved in this giant supply chain incident that put SolarWinds' name all over the media and so on and before. But yeah, I mean, it's not like SolarWinds was hands off and not involved. And in fact, for years, there was a lot of talk. I forget now, I'm blanking on the theme phrase that they used about this, but there was a lot of sort of better together talk, a lot of talk about leveraging products from the corporate side of SolarWinds for the MSPs and the MSP products for the corporate side, and connecting those different parts of the business. So they weren't off on their own doing anything and everything they chose to, but it was a little bit more independent than the rest of the company.
All right, and last question, Luis, I'll throw it out to all three of you to think. Had SolarWinds never had that big breach, would this company be called Enable, and would they be spinning it off? Luis, to you first.
Well, I can tell you the SolarWinds issue really impacted the brand of SolarWinds MSP, as well as the other products that SolarWinds owns that were branded SolarWinds. So for example, we
have been using Passportal, which is a password vault system for years and years and years. And when we started working with them, they were standalone company. They got acquired by SolarWinds, so they rebranded SolarWinds Passportal. SolarWinds Orion happens, and we had clients blowing up our phones saying, remove this instantly. And we had to tell them the two are not related. There's nothing that has to do with this. So I can only imagine if you were SolarWinds partner, SolarWinds MSP partner, that same reaction was happening across the board to your client base, people questioning whether they were going to be victimized simply because, you know, it was SolarWinds. So I think the rebranding had to absolutely take place. Would they have rebranded? I think they still would have gone, you know, spun it off, because that, like Rich said, they've been talking about that before that event happened. I don't know if they would have changed the name, though. I think they might have tried to leverage the SolarWinds name back when it was a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing.
Interesting. Rich, you concur? Colleen?
I actually suspect they would have changed the name. I suspect strongly the plan for a long time has been that after this split happens, SolarWinds is no longer, you know, part of the picture on the other side of the company, and so just from a brand clarity standpoint, they probably would have done. But you know, the timing is good. If I'm right, the timing is good on this, because yeah, you just don't want to be close. Still, I think, to the SolarWinds brand right now. It's just there's too much explanation and reassurance you probably have to do with customers at this point.
Right. Colleen, final word.
So yeah, I agree. I'm sure that that reputation damage was pretty intense, as Louis said. So I'm sure the Enable brand will sit better with folks.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. All right, so we'll see how that goes July 12th and 19th, and we'll see how the stock does when it finally hits, and see how all that shakes out. But we're gonna move on to a segment that I love on this show, and that is the ChannelPro Book Club. We got our 2021 summer reading list. Now, Colleen, like, the book club's kind of your baby. This is your idea. This is something that you've ran with, and it's just great every time we get one of these. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book club and what it's about?
Okay, well, so I go back to the early days of ChannelPro, and they would run an occasional article, probably annually, about, you know, books, a summer read list. But then, you know, book club became popular over time, you know, in the larger media. And so a few years ago, I thought, well, ChannelPro should have its own book club, because I interview a lot of the folks who are MSPs, and a lot of them are big readers, like Louis, who we've talked books with. And so I just thought it would be a good fit for ChannelPro. I
love it. It's great. So we've got our 2021 summer reading list, and we won't go through all these because that would take too long. But why don't we all pick one? So Colleen, we'll give you two, because you probably know the list a lot more intimately than the rest of us do. But Louis, have you got a chance to look through the summer reading list?
I did. In fact, I have my own copy of Double Double, which was on the list that I read years ago. That I saw it on the list. I said, I should read that book again, because it was very impactful in helping us understand, or helping me understand, how you can grow. And it was one of the early books that helped my leadership team and I really understand how we can position ourselves for better growth and smarter growth. And since then, we've done, taken some of the lessons from that book and, adapted them, as I think I mentioned last time, because I was here for book club last year, I think. And we talked about another book that I love called Traction, which is part of the entrepreneurial operating system and has a lot of the same themes as Double Double. So I'm going to go back to that one.
So Louis likes the book Double Double. Colleen, why don't you give us the next pick to talk about?
So I like aspirational reads, and I'm always impressed by companies that both do well and do good. And so when this book, Start Something That Matters, was recommended by an MSP in Maine, about the story of Tom's Shoes and how it's a social business, and they've done quite well. They've started out by donating shoes for every shoe bought to folks in need. And then they went on to expand that one-to-one program in other areas of the business. And I have not read it, but it's on my summer reading list.
Awesome. Rich, one of these appeal to you? Have you read one of these before?
I have not read any of them before. The one that appealed to me, and in some ways it has the most kind of universal appeal, but there's a book on the list called Atomic Habits. And basically it's about forming the kind of habits that you want, which could be business related habits, but obviously it could be something like, getting better about exercising or what you eat and so on and so forth. And there is, according to the ChannelPro who recommended this book, there's some really good practical and according to the author of the book, easy and proven ways to form healthy habits. And so I'm very curious about that one. Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Very interesting. Colleen, let's pick out one more to talk about, and then we'll move on. What give us one more good one to think about.
Well, just picking up on what Rich said, the MSP who recommended that book to me said it totally changed his life. He went on a new path of healthy eating, healthy living, lost a ton of weight, and just feels better about himself. It's translated into his business. So, check out Atomic Habits, recommended by Ross Bruce out of New Jersey. And so the other book I wanted to mention was Rhinoceros Success, simply because I think the title's funny. And also it's a quick, simple read according to Mike Bazar, who recommended it. And he said it's like about not overthinking things, not waiting till something's perfect before you get started doing something, but to charge through the jungle like a rhinoceros would when it has a target in mind or food ahead. So I think that would be a good, interesting read, and quick too for summertime by the pool.
Yeah, I hope I'm never in the jungle with a charging rhinoceros coming towards me. That seems like it would be a very scary thing. And would reading that book help me defend myself against said charging rhinoceros?
It might help you defend yourself against charging colleagues.
That could be useful too. Oh, there's another book on here, and actually one that I have read, not all of, but I've read some of it, and that is Manuel Palachuk's book is on this list, Getting to the Next Level, the blueprint for taking you and your business to the top. That's a good one to check out. I'm about halfway through that one, Rich. But it's but we've had Manuel Palachuk on the show several times, so I see his book on here. It's a good one to talk about. I'm sure he'd appreciate a little bit of a plug there. So there's some other books on the list. So we encourage you to go to channelpronetwork.com, find the summer reading list, check those out, and then send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Give us a comment on the socials of any of these that you've read that you liked, which ones were good, which ones weren't good. And of course, we're always looking for more suggestions of other books that you would recommend for us to check out as well. Colleen, when will we get the next reading list? Is this a winter reading list, or do we get a fall list too?
Oh, I always like to do kind of a back to school list for those actually going back to school, but more for their parents who, now that the kids are back to school and college, the parent has time to read. Awesome. Well, we will look forward to that. Thank you so much for being on. We're gonna say goodbye to you. So again, thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll see you back on an episode soon. All right. See you in Atlanta. Yeah, I'll see you. Definitely. I'll see you next week. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we got a great interview lined up with Joseph Brunsman, president of the Brunsman Advisory Group. We're going to talk about a little bit about cyber insurance and lots of other stuff. You won't want to miss it. Luis Alvarez will be with us as well. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
These days, cyber threats lurk around every corner, in almost every email, and what seems like every link you click. MSPs do everything possible to protect their customers from the nefarious, but what happens when you can't? Well, that's where cyber insurance comes in. And here to talk about some tips, tricks, and trends in cyber insurance is Joseph Brunsman, president of the Brunsman Advisory Group. Welcome, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. We've got to talk a little bit here before we started recording. So fascinating guy, lots of interesting stuff to talk about. Why don't you first start just by telling us a little bit about you and kind of what you do at Brunsman Advisory Group?
Sure. So a little bit about my background. I'm a former IT. That's how I started in the Navy on the enlisted side, went to the Naval Academy, got my degree in robotics, did about 12 years total in the Navy. And as we were saying before, did not get to see a UFO. So that's when I decided my time there was done. And then from there, went and got my master's in cybersecurity law. I've written 3 books, contributed to a 4th on blockchain and cryptocurrency. The first 3 are all about insurance, primarily cyber insurance, cybersecurity law, compliance, all that fun stuff. And now I am the owner of Brunsman Advisory Group, and we are doing a ton of good work with MSPs out there. So working both on the insurance side for the MSP, trying to make sure they stay out of trouble, giving us some risk management advice. Maybe we'll talk about some of that here. And then doing cyber insurance for their clients as well. So it's a really cool field to be in because it's constantly changing and moving and it's dynamic. And I can still kind of get a little bit of that technology that I enjoy anyway. So it's a great opportunity for me and I really enjoy my job. As nerdy as that sounds, I actually enjoy insurance. Don't judge me.
I mean, we could go into a lot of the psychological issues you might have around that statement, but before we dive into your inner psyche and love of insurance, I got to ask you this question. So what you have done had you stared out your window and seen a UFO? Like, what is what's the first 2 things you do?
Well, being a robotics engineer and like a tech guy at heart, my first question would be, okay, is there any sort of external control surface? Because that would essentially stipulate some of the physics behind what's going on. And then I would want to see, okay, if there's no external control surfaces, then probably external propulsion is not what we would think of, right? So it's not like thing goes forward because stuff comes out the back. And then the next thing I'd want to know is, are the aliens wearing helmets? Because my assumption would be, and this is obviously very nerdy here, but my assumption would be that if they have technology that advanced, that either they are way ahead of us in terms of evolution, or they came from a planet with a low oxygen content. So the whole idea of combustibles wasn't really a thing. And so they had to branch off into this completely different area of physics, where they're, I guess in theory, somehow manipulating space-time, and they're essentially just falling through space-time. And that's how they're able to make these crazy turns and, I mean, just accelerations that would turn all of us if we were sitting in that aircraft, or we'll call it an aircraft. I mean, we would just be jelly on the inside of that thing. So those are probably the first 2 things I would think of.
Wow, you know, I was thinking like, what would the first thing I would do be? And I think the first thing I would do is try to grab a camera.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea too.
But like, yeah, that's like really getting into it there. Now I wonder if they're not wearing helmets, if they have laws around that, or if they just have really thick skulls. I don't know. We'll have to dive into that later. But unfortunately, that'll have to be for our next episode on UFO Weekly here. But go ahead.
My wife says I have a thick skull. That's what my wife tells me every day, and I'm not wearing a helmet, so I don't know. We'd have to talk that one through.
Awesome. So it's been a storied history with you kind of getting into cyber insurance. So Rich, I kind of want to turn the conversation over to you for a moment to kind of set up like what we want to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you exactly why I'm really happy to have you on the show, Joseph. We were both at the ConnectWise IT Nation Secure event last week. I believe you spoke there. And like hours after I arrived at that event, there was that opening night reception, and I was talking to somebody who said, "Oh, you got to go track down this Joseph Brunsman guy," because I was just talking cyber insurance with him, and he really gets this from the inside, and he knows the MSP angles. So I've been looking forward to having this conversation actually ever since then. One of the things you said when you're introducing yourself is this is a dynamic market. It changes all the time. And my understanding is it's changed a lot since the arrival of COVID-19. So, I mean, let's start there. How has the cyber insurance market changed in the last 18 months or whatever.
Sure. So if you go back, I mean, I got into cyber insurance, let's see, 6 years ago. There was no money in it. Most businesses at the SMB level didn't really care. It was just kind of a passion project for me. I just thought it was super cool and interesting. And then kind of as the years progressed, more and more businesses starting into it. So my firm traditionally has a bunch of financial services firms that are just legacy clients. And so they kind of started getting into it first. And with those clients, I could literally ask for anything I wanted. I mean, there was no roadblock to me. So I could ask for any increase in a sublimit. I could ask for any amendatory language. I mean, it was the Wild West. And even crazier, we would see businesses get hit with some type of cyber event. So we could say data breach, ransomware, exfiltration of funds. And then you would think that their next cyber renewal would be more expensive because they just cost a company a significant amount of money. Well, then I could go out and get them a different cyber policy from a different cyber insurer for actually less money than they paid before the breach. So if you think of any other line of insurance, like, I mean, I'm not an auto insurance guy, but it doesn't make sense that you would get in a car wreck and then your auto insurance would go down, right? Like we consider that a moral hazard. So it used to be sky's the limit and I could ask for anything I wanted. The cyber insurance companies didn't really ask any questions because they didn't even know what to ask. And so that was kind of a fun game to play, actually. And then once COVID happened, you saw a ton of work from home, huge ramp up. I mean, just in the attack surface, as we all know, the bad guys can get into. And one of the things I saw was that there was just such a quick push to get everybody out the door, but keep the business running, that cybersecurity was kind of a secondary or tertiary priority. Whereas, sysadmin, just get everybody on a computer working was priority number one. And so with that, you obviously saw the massive spike in ransomware events, correlating, of course, to some degree with the increase in cryptocurrency costs, just because of the inflation, courtesy of the Federal Reserve. So there's kind of a lot of market dynamics moving here. But suffice to say, kind of a 30,000 foot view is the golden days of cyber insurance are over. And now cyber insurance companies are losing money just at a phenomenal rate. And there's some reasons behind that, but I will say one major cyber insurance company, I will not name them, they have a loss ratio of 170%. So what that means, and they are a big player in the cyber insurance market. So what that means is for every dollar that comes in the door for someone buying cyber insurance, $1.70 is going out the door. And that has probably only gone up, that loss ratio, in the last few months. So they're really starting to buckle down. There are specific industries that it's almost impossible to get them cyber insurance, or it's going to cost a significant amount of money. Sublimits are way lower. So like the specific widgets that you'll see in a policy, for example, your bookkeeper gets tricked into wiring money to some bad guy somewhere. Well, it used to be I could get you $1 million of coverage for that. But then cyber insurance companies quickly wised up because they said, hey, if it's as easy as 1-2 click, you lost $1 million, we got to really lower that down. So it's really changing the dynamic. And I think it's going to ultimately be good for society because now businesses have to take cybersecurity seriously. So like I'm a large proponent, being a former IT and being a big nerd, that if you're looking at defense in depth, cyber insurance is like the last layer. It's not the first answer because there's plenty of things that cyber insurance can't do. And so does that answer your question in a very somewhat long-winded fashion?
No, it absolutely does. I mean, and it creates a great context for a lot of what I've been hearing lately. And so I want to kind of get into, who can and can't get insurance now. What do you do if you have trouble getting insurance? But first, I mean, one of the things that I've heard from people, and this, it's predictable given what you were just talking about, but the insurance companies losing tons of money on cyber insurance are getting tougher and tougher on claims. They're not paying claims as readily as they would before. So, I mean, to what extent are you seeing that? What kind of techniques are they, utilizing basically to avoid paying out?
So it's somewhat hard to tell. And there's a number of factors behind that. One is there are maybe 2 or 3 people like me in the US that really focus in this area. And if there was a big declination of coverage somewhere, if there was some case law, if there was some legal record of that, I'd be the first person to put out a video on it to say, hey, this is what you have to watch out for. So I think where we're actually seeing declinations, it's not going to be in the legal record. And that could be because they settled it with the insurance company or they didn't even fight it. So there's really no paperwork trail there. Most cyber insurance companies, I think now are still fairly hesitant to deny coverage for a number of reasons. One, the policy forms are so broad that they would have to litigate that, and that could be very expensive. So if it's, say, $100,000 loss, the insurance company would go, okay, well, maybe it's going to cost us $250,000 to figure out what this particular phrase means, and we don't want that negative publicity. So unless it's a really clear-cut case of late report of a potential claim, or they didn't have that specific policy feature, probably not going to see a lot of declinations there. A lot of the declinations we do see really in the legal record are the very high dollar declinations. So that would be like the NotPetya virus, for example, potentially some SolarWinds issues. And you have to be careful talking about those because at that level of insurance, somewhat cynically, that's just how the game is played. Because when you have $100 million in a cyber policy and an insurance company denies you coverage, of course they're going to do that. They're going to find every possible angle to get out of paying $100 million. Or, somewhat more cynically, they know, okay, it may cost us $6 million to litigate this, and there's a 90% chance we're going to lose. But in the meantime, we're generating revenue off the float from that $100 million. So it's very nuanced, I would say, looking from the outside in. But, with that being said, thankfully, I have never had for my clients a declination of coverage, but I have had to fight insurance companies. And thankfully, I have the background to do that, but most people just don't. And so I'd say, for businesses looking for cyber insurance, and to make a quick clarification, MSPs should not have cyber insurance. This would be for their clients. And we could talk about why that is here in a second. But they need to first war game with all the head players in the room. What are we actually concerned about? Right? And then how do we ensure that? And then take that information to the insurance guy. Because insurance guys, there's really no expertise in this area at the moment. It's not like something like homeowners insurance where you can just buy it online and it's probably going to be okay. It's way more difficult than that. And there's just not a lot of money still in cyber insurance. So not a lot of economic incentive for most people to jump into it. So I would say for all those businesses out there, figure out what you're worried about. Like what are those big loss scenarios? And then see if you can find a policy that fits that, as opposed to going the other way around and just hoping that you got it right, because that's really where we're going to see a lot of declinations.
Hey, one quick question before you continue that line of questioning, Rich. You were talking about how there's a lot of broad cyber insurance contracts and that sometimes it's easier just to pay out. Is there a lot of fraud, especially at the small dollar amount in cyber insurance claims?
I mean, I've never seen it. I'm sure there must be some fraud out there. Fraud obviously permeates every industry. I think it would be very difficult to evidence fraud in a cyber policy, only because so many of those scenarios that we deal with on the cyber side require external forensics teams to come in. And so in theory, you could do it if you were really smart and you knew exactly what you were doing. But then I'd say generally, if you're that smart and you know what you're doing, you could probably make a lot more money being a good guy, trying to help the world out.
Interesting. All right. Rich, please carry on.
Yeah, well, I mean, these companies are losing money hand over foot. They sort of got the permissiveness level maybe wrong before in terms of who they were willing to insure. So I assume they're a little bit more strict now in terms of who they will cover. And this goes to your point in terms of, their requirements maybe motivating people to do things that they should have been doing anyway. What are some of the new requirements out there, the new standards that they're insisting on before they will issue a policy?
So once again, it depends on a couple factors: who the cyber insurance company is, how big the policy is, what industry we're looking at. But I'll say 30,000 foot view, cloud-based backups are now making a big wave in the industry. I see a lot more cyber insurers requiring that. And for example, one cyber insurer is saying, hey, if you don't have cloud-based backups, then you get a $25,000 ransomware sublimit. And you'd blow through 25 grand on a ransomware event in like the first day. I mean, no questions asked.
Easily. Yeah, absolutely.
So in that instance, it's, hey, you're getting cloud-based backups now, if you have them or not. Besides that, it's not anything that's really high speed or high tech. We're not seeing super advanced controls. A lot of it's just very fundamental controls that they're requiring now, or people just aren't going to be able to get cyber insurance. So basic endpoint security, some element of like a 3-2-1 backup strategy. I mean, you could just look at, say, like the first, 10 controls of what is, I guess now the CIS top 18.
Yeah.
You could just look at that. And if you don't have it, either one, it's going to be a requirement for your business moving forward on the cyber insurance side, or two, you're going to have an event and then they're going to require it anyways. So you might as well just get the party started and do it the easy way, as opposed to, hey, here's your quote. You have 30 days to do all this stuff, or you're going to have crazy restrictions on what's covered, or they're not even going to offer a quote to you anyways. So I would just say, hey, just get everybody started now, because people are losing a significant amount of money. And if you're not willing to implement those controls, I mean, they'll just pass on your business. It's just that simple.
We do a lot of consulting with our MSP clients when they go through their cyber insurance renewals. And 5 years ago, when cyber insurance started being a thing, it was like a one-page document that you just said, yes, I have backups. Yes, I have a firewall. The latest one was a 10-page document where they specifically called out, like, do you use Office 365? If you're using Office 365, are you using multi-factor authentication? And so it's very, very specific about what they're looking for. So it seems to me like the insurance companies has finally engaged with like forensic cyber security guys to say, okay, what should we be asking? What are the questions that we need to ask to make sure that the people that we're insuring actually are doing the things they need to do to protect themselves and reduce claims?
Oh, absolutely. And let's make just a quick, seemingly pedantic distinction, but it is important. So if you're an MSP, I said previously, you should not have a standalone cyber policy for various reasons, which I can dig into if you guys want to. What you should most likely have is something called a tech E&O policy, is the general insurance term for that. So that is both E&O coverage. So that would be, for example, client thinks you screwed something up, or they got hit with ransomware and now they're going to come back and sue you, as well as the cyber side of a tech E&O policy, which could be dependent business interruption, dependent system failure, breaking, business interruption, dealing with ransomware events, and then some other kind of miscellaneous coverage features there as well. But yeah, you're entirely correct. So on the tech E&O application side, we've already had entire insurance companies just bail from the market. So for example, I believe Hiscox just no longer offers new MSPs tech E&O insurance. And I think what the MSP community should take out of that is, no matter how good you think your MSP is, look at what the big brains and the big dollars are doing. There are teams of attorneys and teams of actuaries who study every single case, who have metrics and information that none of us have access to because it's all proprietary in-house. And those guys are saying either A, this is getting bad, and we're bringing up the rates, we're bringing up all the premiums, right, above just kind of the standard growth. Or they're saying we're just going to bail on this market entirely because the risk is just way too high. So I think that should be the wake-up call for MSPs, where it's like, hey, it's not Joe, the insurance guy, saying this. It's we're looking at very intelligent people with, we'll say, relatively unlimited dollars and unlimited manpower who are looking at that problem saying, this is a big issue and it's only getting worse. And you're correct, where they're absolutely requiring very, very specific controls at the MSP level.
So for somebody in the audience right now who has a like a traditional E&O policy and a cyber insurance policy, I mean, should they be thinking about exchanging that for a tech E&O?
They should. There's a couple of reasons for that. So the easiest way to explain it from a 30,000 foot view is cyber policies and E&O policies both potentially have coverage if a client comes back and sues you after some type of event, right? We'll call that a claim. So the issue with that is, let's use an analogy. Let's say you just bought a home and you buy 2 homeowners policies, both for the entire limit of your house, whatever your house is worth. And then your house burns down, right? Do you think that you would get twice the value of your house back in insurance money? No, because that's a moral hazard, right? We don't want people profiting from insurance. We just want people being made whole again, or close to whole again. But what does happen is you have something called a mutually repugnant other insurance clause. So both your E&O policy and your cyber policy, they both likely have this little phrase in there, and they differ slightly, but broadly speaking, it's if there's anything covered under this policy that's covered under somebody else's policy, it's the other guy's problem. So then what would happen? You would end up in this infinite loop of stupidity where you're the consumer and insurance companies are just pointing the finger at the other guy forever. So the courts have really struggled on how to deal with this. It depends on the fact pattern of the case. It depends on the jurisdiction that you're located, et cetera, et cetera. But what I tell people is you might have to eventually pay both of your deductibles for only the highest limit of insurance you have on one policy. So what does that mean in monetary terms? That means that the MSP is taking on a lot more risk in a monetary sense than they otherwise thought, right? So now they're shelling out even more money than they would have anticipated. E&O policies tend to have very high deductibles. Cyber policies tend to have low deductibles. So you don't really want to start mixing those two. On top of that, let's say you're dealing with a claim. Now you've got multiple insurance companies involved. Each one has their own money on the line. So they're going to be, playing the big boy game of no, I'm in charge, no, I'm in charge, pointing fingers. And then you just get stuck in the middle of that. And then the other issue is if you just have an E&O policy, we'll call it a miscellaneous E&O, which is what we call it, with some type of like tech services endorsement on there. Generally, those are what's called a named peril policy. And that means like, hey, we're going to cover you for these things only, right? And it's a very specific list. And if you don't get that list right, you could really get burned on that. Because let's say there's some allegation from the plaintiff that's outside of that list, or you've never looked at that list. I'm sure everyone's read their whole E&O policy. You've never looked at that list. So let's say you're providing services outside of that list, and that's part of the claim. Very high probability that you'll have either a partial or full declination of coverage on that claim, right? So you paid all this money, you thought you had protection, and then lo and behold, you didn't have what you needed. Whereas if you go with more, I'll just say a tech E&O policy, much broader in terms of what it's covering. So for all the MSPs out there, I would just say the 80-20 of E&O insurance is look at the definition of professional services and the definition of technology services. So that's really saying, hey, this is what we're going to cover. And then everything else from there are really just details that nerds like me get fixated on and go down the rabbit hole with. But that's kind of the broad idea of why I made that consideration.
Yeah. Louis, is that a magical day for you when you get a new E&O policy? You want to like light some candles and
No.
sit on the sofa and just revel in the text that is legalese mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, it's that's when you end up hiring a guy like Joseph or an attorney that specializes in this stuff that you work with, that you trust, because they're going to go through it for you to see what's changed, because every year the policy changes. It's not the same old policy. It's not like getting a car insurance where it's basically the same thing over and over and over again. There are things that typically change, and there are things that you have to go back to your carrier. Our attorney will say, hey, I'm not sure what this means, so you need clarification here. And we'll go back and forth and back and forth. Fortunately, we've been with the same carrier for about 10 years, and we trust them, and we've never had to file a claim. So maybe that's why we trust them, because we haven't had any reason not to. But I do think that insurance is one of those things that is tricky. And if you're an MSP, and I know a lot of MSPs are out there and they're talking to their clients and saying, oh, you have to get cyber insurance, you got to get cyber insurance. Make sure you understand what you're saying, because you might be giving your clients a false sense of security when they do go out and get cyber insurance, and then it turns out that they run into an issue that's not covered. And then they go back to you and say, well, you told me if I paid this premium, I'd be good and I'd be solid. So understand what you're talking about before you go out there and start recommending things. Just like in anything an MSP does, you really need to understand what it means and how it's going to impact your client.
And that's great advice, Louis. And the discussion before that, Joseph, about E&O. I mean, these are like two good examples of something that a broad question that I kind of want to ask, which is just what are some of the most common mistakes or misconceptions, misunderstandings that MSPs tend to have about cyber insurance in your experience with them?
Sure. So if we're talking specifically about cyber insurance, the biggest misconception is, one, they're all the same, but they're actually all different. And so just because you look at the declarations page, so right there at the beginning, and it's like, hey, you have $500,000 for theft of funds, right? It's like, well, what does that really mean? So you could actually have the same insurance company with two different cyber insurance policies. Let's say this one's surplus lines, this one's admitted. I'll save you the nerdy distinction between the two. They could both say theft of funds and mean entirely different things. And so I would just say, for an MSP, you probably don't want to be giving official insurance advice. But if you are going to be looking at it, you really want to look at the definitions. And then in terms of self-preservation, I would say really kind of two things. One, I think it's a good practice to contractually require cyber insurance from all of your clients. If you get pushback, you can always blame the insurance company. You could say, hey, my E&O insurance company says we have to do this, because everybody hates insurance companies. Myself, probably more than anybody in the present room here. And then really the reason behind that, there's a few reasons. I have a whole YouTube channel where people can just search my name. So there's a whole video on why every MSP client should have / want cyber insurance. I dig into a little bit more there. I just put out a video today on risk management and risk transference fundamentals for MSPs. So they can get that. It's called Get Smart. But if you think about the legal side, what do you actually need to bring a claim against somebody, right? To file a lawsuit in court and proceed with that. Well, Supreme Court of the US has said at an irreducible minimum, so this is like the absolute minimum that you need, are three things. You need injury in fact. So you have to show, hey, I was hurt or I was damaged because of this, right? So you could say my business lost the ability to do business. Then you need traceability, right? And that's, I can point the finger at my MSP and say it's his fault. And then the third element of that would be redressability, which is if you give me money, I will be made whole again, right? There's a little more to it than that, but generally redressability in today's day and age is just money. So what you're trying to do there is you're trying to remove that third leg of redressability. So what are the big claims for MSPs going to be from if their clients are going to sue them? It's probably that business interruption piece, right? That's where they could lose a whole lot of money. And so what you're trying to do is remove that element. So if you do face a claim, I mean, you still could for some, general cause of action, unjust enrichment, breach of contract, negligence, blah, blah, blah. But you're trying to take the big dollar stuff away and preserve your E&O policy for what it's actually meant to do when you make a legitimate error or omission, right? You're not trying to use your E&O policy as a piggy bank every time Karen in accounting wires 250 grand out the door, right? And then the other thing I would just say is, with all this, don't be afraid to put the onus back on the insurance company. And I think Luis was talking about that a little bit earlier, where all of these questionnaires you're going to see, right? It's going to be all kinds of stuff. Some of that is the MSP just cannot answer, right? It's not in your wheelhouse. Don't be afraid to push back to the client. So if there's a question like, does HR communicate with IT to revoke access immediately upon termination? Right? Like, you are not the HR manager. That is not your job to answer that question, right? You need the HR person to come in and clarify to make sure that they're singing off the same sheet of music as you. And a lot of these questions are just yes, no. And as technology people, we understand it's not that simple. Sometimes it's a maybe, sometimes it's a circumstantially, sometimes it's a 99% of the time, but there's this one exception based on this legacy system that's air gapped, blah, blah, blah. So what you can do is just add an addendum, right? So instead of checking yes, no, or NA, right, just say see addendum and then just write the explanation in there. And what are you doing? You're putting the onus back on the insurance company to ask clarifying questions, as opposed to you as the MSP doing everything exactly within the letter of what that insurance company is going to want later on the line if there's some type of litigation there. So those are kind of some helpful hints for everybody.
I can think of a really good addendum. I think what I want to do is I want to start a business that manufactures floppy disks, and then write an addendum that says every company has to ensure that they back up all of their data onto 3.5-inch floppy disks. Because I'd sell 1 trillion of them. It'd be great. And then I could sell warehouse space to store them all. Luis, I got another business venture for you, buddy.
No, not going down that road. We've lost enough money on other things.
Now, this is what the insurance companies should do, though, right? Is that we'll cover you as long as all your data is backed up on 3.5-inch disks, and then they get into the disk business. It's solid gold.
It's smart. This is smart stuff here, and we can even say double density, so that way they can use half as many floppy disks. They'll still need a good trillion or so to get it done. So this is a good use of resources. I think we should go down this path. Luis, I think we got time for maybe one last question. If you want to take that.
Yeah. So Joseph, to what extent do you think the fact that cyber insurance exists has caused the amount of ransomware demands to the value to go up? Because we've heard of incidences, not us, but locally, where literally the first question that is asked by the cyber criminals is, do you have cyber insurance? And then the demand goes up.
Yeah, so that's let me take a step back real fast and qualify my answer here before I make everybody in the crypto sphere angry and hate me. So I will just say, by temperament and biology, I'm more of a libertarian. So I'm not a Keynesian economics guru. I don't fundamentally agree with Keynesian economics. I think there's some moral and ethical issues with fractional reserve banking, fiat currency systems. We can look at the history of economics and why that's a terrible idea, and it always ends in complete and utter disaster. Hence the whole reason, if you read the Creature from Jekyll Island, that's kind of, I think, the Bible of cryptocurrency advocates, to put it succinctly. So I'm no fan of that. I've actually, somewhere behind me here, that book, I actually wrote a whole chapter on the insurance side of cryptocurrency and blockchain. so that's how I'm going to preface this, right? I have no deep-seated hatred or disrespect of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency or blockchain technology. To many regards, I think it's almost an ethical imperative that we have that type of stuff. But with that being said, to answer your question, I think we could just go back and say, hey, in 1990, how many ransomware events did we have? Like relatively few, if any. And so what I think is ultimately going to happen, and I know this is heresy and people may try and burn me at the stake for this, but I think they're actually going to ban private cryptocurrencies is ultimately what's going to happen here, because there's a number of, say, like deep-seated macroeconomic issues with that. So if you look at the national debt, you look at inflation, right? And then you have the people with all the guns and all the power are essentially the ones that are never going to own up to the fact that they were horrifically irresponsible with our fiscal strategy, and the fact that inflation and national debt are real things. Those are real boundaries to how a society can actually function. And that is just kind of, it's almost a law of physics, right? Modern monetary theory is bunk, I would say, to a large degree. And so what I think is going to happen is they will use very, very simple methodologies. And we're already seeing this. I put a whole video on my YouTube channel. So what are they saying? So to appeal to the people on the left, it's, hey, cryptocurrencies are leading to global warming, right? It's a contributing factor. On the right, it's very simple. Hey, remember that time you couldn't get gas? Cryptocurrency. Remember that time where you couldn't afford meat for your family? Cryptocurrency. And we already saw the Bank of International Settlements. They came out this week talking about how private cryptocurrencies are bad for the world. They put out a paper, I think, a few months ago talking about how 80 of the top economies in the world are all creating their own, essentially, Fed coin, like a centralized cryptocurrency. So they're taking that technology and using it for their own purposes. That could obviously lead to an incredibly dystopian future where everything you ever purchase or do is completely tracked and traceable. Yeah, it's terrifying. But I think that the rational explanation is eventually we're going to get to a point where could a cryptocurrency rival the US dollar? Absolutely, it could. But the people with all the guns and all the power, do we really think that they're going to say, okay, let's crash the world economy, remove the dollar as the world's reserve currency, and remove the ability as a politician to fund all of their pet projects and special interest groups? Or are they going to say, hey, let's ban, we'll just say Bitcoin, for example, right? Well, FDR banned gold, the private holding of gold, in 1933. And I was born in 85. I was kind of shocked to find it wasn't until, I believe, 1974 that the private holding of gold was actually legalized again. And so it's not without precedence. Australia did it, Britain did it. So I guess long answer into a short form here. Yes, I do think that the rise of cryptocurrencies has contributed to the rise of ransomware events. How you look at that in a utilitarian calculus fashion, like are cryptocurrencies doing more good than they are harm in society, is a very complicated calculus to actually sit down and factor through. But I think, although I am not happy with what I perceive as the most likely outcome, I think that they're going to say, hey, you know what? We can't have one guy click on the wrong thing and shut down the fuel system for the eastern seaboard of the US, right? It's a national security risk, or it's a funding element for terrorism. And so they're just going to wipe all that out and replace it with, here in the United States, FedCoin. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I know that was a long answer.
Yeah, no. That's a great explanation. And I'm going to go check out your YouTube channel because I think I need to a lot.
Yeah, fascinating discussion, Joseph. I've got two key takeaways, at least for me, on this. One is after hearing you talk about all this stuff, I now know why I am not an economist nor an insurance person, because like it's just crazy complicated. But this is stuff that people need to deal with because this is reality today. And I highly encourage them to do exactly what Lewis said. Check out your YouTube channel and to get in touch with you. And if they were going to do that and they wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about you and what you can do for them, how can they do that?
So the easiest thing to do is you can just find me on YouTube. My contact information is on there. So just search for Joseph Brunsman and you'll find my channel. Alternatively, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name. I post my stuff up there too. You can also find me on Reddit. I try to throw little nuggets of knowledge wherever I can and help out the community. On the MSP subreddit, I am Joe_cyber. And then long story about why that actually was my username. And then you can also, if you want to learn more about cyber insurance and compliance, I actually have a 500-page book you can download for free. I would not recommend you read it cover to cover. It is dense. It's got something like 900 endnotes in it if you want to go back to the original source material. But if you go to the Bruns Group, so that's TheBruns Group, group.com/book2, then you can just download my latest book for free, and you can, frankly, know more about cyber insurance and cybersecurity law than 99.9% of insurance guys and actually attorneys, believe it or not, because they call me all the time to talk about that stuff as well. So hopefully that'll help everybody out there.
Well, fantastic. We'll make sure that we put links to some of those things on the show notes page here for episode 191. Go to channelpronetwork.com, find it there. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll try to get the links up there as well in the description area. Joseph, thank you again so much for being here with us. And hopefully we'll get you back. Cyber insurance and all this stuff is not going away anytime soon. So I'm sure we'll have you back.
Mm-hmm. Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Luis Alvarez will be joining us again on the other side. We'll close out the show with some regular end of the show features. We'll have a little bit of fun, and Rich will tell us what might be coming in the future, because he's like a psychic and he can see the future. It's pretty incredible. You won't want to miss it. We will be right back. And welcome back to our final segment here on this episode of Channel Pro Weekly. Still joined here with Luis Alvarez from Alvarez Technology Group. Say hello, Mr. Luis.
Hello.
There he is right there. Bright smiley face. That was a great interview. Went a little long, but like cyber insurance, insurance in itself just boggles my mind. Like it's so complicated and so difficult to understand, and there's all these loopholes and stuff. Like, so I got a lot out of that conversation. I have a much better understanding of how it kind of works. Luis, any takeaways from that interview that you found interesting or fascinating?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching a lot of YouTubes that Joseph put together. I mean, it was, you think you know a lot about this industry, you think you know a lot about cyber insurance, but he really, for me, just kind of brought out some of the things we don't know. And I'm going to have to go back and get a little bit more educated about it.
For sure. Rich, any takeaways?
I'll just quickly say that the topic we got in towards the end of that conversation and the role of cryptocurrencies in ransomware and addressing ransomware is a huge thing. And the very, very short distillation of that huge issue is it's probably impossible to fix ransomware, if that's even theoretically possible at all, without somehow fixing cryptocurrencies. And whether that means, you know, going down the road that Joseph was talking about, or there are huge crossovers there. And as long as those currencies continue to work the way they do now, it's going to be very, very difficult to fix ransomware.
Very true. And that could be a topic, just the societal impact of cyber ransomware and cryptocurrency could be like a whole half-hour topic that we spend just on that. And I don't know if we'll come to any answers of how to fix it, but it certainly would be a fascinating conversation. That is for sure. I also know that if he ever offers alien insurance, he probably, I think he knows something. And as soon as that alien insurance comes out, I'm buying some right off the bat. Okay, you heard it here first, folks. All right. Well, Luis, I'm glad to have you here. You know, we there's a little game we like to play here on Channel Pro Weekly that we call 5 Questions. I don't know if you're aware of this game or not.
We played it last time. It was fun.
We did. All right, good. So I'm trying to remember when we started doing that segment, and I can't remember if it was before or after June of 2020. But it's a fun segment, so you know what it's all about. We're going to ask you 5 questions off the top of our head. We don't script them. We don't write them out in advance. That's one of the promises Rich and I have together. So that means the questions are sometimes ridiculous and sometimes work, sometimes they don't, but it's a lot of fun. So here we go. Rich, I've been very generous lately. I'm still feeling generous. I'm going to give the first question to you.
Okay. Well, we now know your favorite Subway sandwich, Louis. What is your favorite place to get a sandwich?
Favorite place to get well, it's a local place here in Monterey, which is near to where I live. It's called Mundo's, and they make a mean Philly cheesesteak sandwich. And I love Philly cheesesteak sandwiches. So Mundo's it is. If you ever come out to Monterey, California, you got to stop and get it because it's delicious.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Unfortunately, there's nowhere around here to get a good Philly cheesesteak sandwich. So that sounds great. If I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'm going. All right. You talked about fried chicken. So you apparently are a connoisseur of chicken that is fried. Tell me, of the fast food, places that most people like listening around the country will have heard of, who has the worst fried chicken?
Wow, the worst. I would say, and hopefully they're not a sponsor of the show.
Well, if they are, they're not going to be anymore.
I'm not a fan of Church's fried chicken. I love Popeyes, I love Chick-fil-A, but Church's just doesn't do it for me.
What about it do you not like? Because everyone's got their own opinions, and that's okay.
Yeah, so I think it's the breading is thicker than I like. We all like the crunchiness of fried chicken, but sometimes it's more thicker than really necessary, and so you end up, at least I end up finding myself just kind of picking off the fried bits and going for just the chicken because it's a little bit too much.
Interesting. So Church's not Luis Alvarez's favorite. Rich, question number 3 to you.
Well, it begs the question. So we know the worst. What's the best?
I would say it's a tie for me between Chick-fil-A and Popeyes. And I first had Popeyes fried chicken in New Orleans when we were there for a trade show years and years and years ago, and just started searching it out wherever I can. And there's none down here where we live, but there's a bunch of them up in the Bay Area. So whenever I find myself up in the Silicon Valley area, I'm like, I think for lunch, I'm going to do something decadent and have Popeyes.
If you come to my neck of the woods, there's Popeyes everywhere. You will be in heaven. I'm telling you, lots of fried chicken in the Midwest for sure. Various kinds. Rich, what's your favorite fried chicken?
It's a local place. It's here in Seattle. It's called Azel's Fried Chicken. Phenomenal.
Ooh, fried chicken wars. I love it. We gotta have to try all these different places. We'll be 600 pounds by the time we try them all, but that's okay. All right. Question number 4 to me. I'm gonna get off the topic of chicken. Louis, this is a problem with coming up with questions on the fly. All right. If you were going to be any movie villain, which movie villain would you be and why?
Any movie villain, gosh. Well, this is going to sound really strange because I love Meryl Streep. And if you remember her in The Devil Wears Prada, and I loved her character and told myself, I got to be that kind of cool but cruel, being able to devastate people with a look or with a simple word. That would be what I would want to do. That's who I would want to be. Just not the menacing evil guy, not Dr. Strangelove or any of those other characters, but just be able to make somebody wither by giving them that look. So
interesting. It's good you even came up with one on the fly, because there's a lot of movie villains out there. And that's a question that requires a lot of thought and a lot of I got to think of all these different movies that I've seen. But that's a good one. I like your rationale for that one. That one's good. Rich, question number 5 to you.
So this gives me a chance to follow up on something I've been curious about for a long time. I can't remember if this was when you were last on the podcast or when we were recording something else together. I just remember you had a stop coming up. You had to go because you were going to be serving on the crew of a racing yacht somewhere, and you had to go. So what do you do when you do that, and how? I mean, just tell me a little bit more about being on the crew of a racing yacht.
Sure. Well, as CEOs, I always tell my, anybody that I know that runs a company, that you need to find something that helps you decompress and helps you get away from, all the thoughts that just occupy your mind. And for me, that's sailing, and in particular, racing on the water, because when you're sailing a boat and you're in the middle of a race, you cannot think about anything else other than what you're doing, whatever part of the crew you are. And I work, we're a smaller boat that I crew on, and it's 4 people on the boat. And I work main sheet, which means I control the big middle sail, the main sail on the sailboat. So you're always trimming that thing and trying to get the best speed, because this is, they call it a one design race. So all the other boats that you're racing against are exactly like yours. So there's no advantage in size or in configuration, because every other boat's exactly like your boat. So the only differentiation is your ability to find wind on the water and your skill at trimming the sails. And I've been doing that for close to 15 years now. We have a boat, but I don't race that boat. That's my, as we call it, a Pinot cruiser, because the only time I get on that boat is if I can hold the tiller with one hand and a glass of wine with the other. And if the weather's not conducive to that, we don't go out on that boat. But racing, we race in any conditions, and sometimes it gets wet and wild out there, and sometimes it's just a beautiful day on the water, and it feels terrific. And we sail in Monterey Bay, so it's on the Pacific Ocean.
Interesting. I have a friend actually who does sailboat racing as well. She's more on the Atlantic side and the Great Lakes. They do a lot of races. She actually just did one, and I was asking her about it because I was trying to figure out what's because it sounds really fun and really exciting. And then I was asking her, like, so what do you do on the boat? And she's like, well, sometimes you just have to hang your butt off the side to be a weight, and you have to sit there for like 7 hours. And I looked at her and I'm like, that doesn't sound very fun, right? Like, you're a weight.
Yeah, I've done that job, and we call them rail meat. And yeah, it's a beautiful term. But the idea behind it is some of the bigger boats need to have weight to offset their heel, right? So a boat will heel. And if you don't have enough weight up here, you can kind of heel more than you want to. So what's exciting about that job, you're not really doing anything on the boat other than as the boat tacks, you jump from one side to the other while avoiding all the lines, all the boom movements, and all the sail movements. So it's kind of a ballet where you end up kicking people in the mouth, and they elbow you on the way to the other side. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of exercise. Let me put it to you that way.
And Louis, I thank you so much that you have now just given me a new nickname for her. This is going to be so much fun when she gets back, because she literally was just racing. Like, she just finished her race like 3 days ago and isn't even back yet. So this is going to be awesome. Oh, thank you so much. It was the best. Well, that was a great round of 5 questions. I really appreciate it. Rich, if you can, tell us what we might have missed and what might be coming up ahead.
Well, you know what? A great place to find out what you might have missed is our weekly In Case You Missed It post, written by ChannelPro's own James Gaskin. This week, James is going to be talking about HP's lightest consumer laptop ever, Dell's first 4K webcam, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise buying Zerto. That's breaking news as well, actually, as we record this, announced just today. Some new firewalls from SonicWall, and a story about a guy in India who got a call from the local government asking him to swing by the office and pick up his own death certificate. James will explain that to you in this week's In Case You Missed It post. You know what? Coming up next week, it's a holiday week, so not a whole lot going on in the industry, except we at ChannelPro are going to be in Atlanta doing our latest SMB forum event. which is a hybrid event. We're doing 5 really. We're doing 6 of these kind of regional events in different cities around the country. The one that we did last time in Dallas and the 4 that we're doing between now and the end of the year are hybrid events, meaning you can be with us in person in a hotel room in Atlanta if you like, or if you want to watch the show online, you can do that too. We're going to be talking about tips and tricks for boosting your cloud margins, zero trust security. Manuel Palachuk, who we mentioned before, is going to be giving or presenting the latest installment of this wonderful 6 installment series on building a strategic roadmap that he's doing for us this year. So great stuff in Atlanta for our readers in that part of the country coming up next week. If you want to learn more, you want to register, because you can still get in, events.channelpronetwork.com, and we hope to see you there.
I do hope you see it, because if you want to hear our voices, hear Rich voices, hear my voice, the only way you'll actually be able to do that this next week is if you listen to an older episode or come to Atlanta or visit or join the event online, because there will not be an episode of Channel Pro Weekly next week there, because the event is on Thursday, I think, right?
Correct.
Rich?
Yep.
Yeah. So like we'll be unable to do a show next week, but we will have a show for you the following week. But please, if you're in Atlanta, or if you can join us online for the event, you'll get a lot out of it. We always have a lot of great stuff, so please join us there. And of course, come up, shake our hands. We always love to meet a listener or two. Big thanks to Luis Alvarez, CEO of Alvarez Technology Group, for joining us. Luis, it's always just a lot of fun having you on. You're a great guy and smart as a whip. So thank you so much for being here. Hope we get you back.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you guys inviting me, and I look forward to coming back at some point in the future. And you guys have fun in Atlanta next week.
We're going to try. And hey, for folks who might maybe want to get a hold of you, learn more about you, where can they go? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find our webpage, alvareztg.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Luis M. Alvarez, and not hard to find. Happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, hopefully they'll seek you out, and we'll see you on a future show. And if you want to find us, well, the best place to do that online is channelpronetwork.com. That's where you can go to find all the latest news, articles, resources, white papers, all kinds of great stuff to help you grow your business, make more money, and keep you in tune with what's going on in the industry. We encourage you to subscribe to the Channel Pro Weekly podcast everywhere podcasts are found. If you would like to watch, we'd love to have you see our faces as well. You can subscribe on YouTube, hit the red button and the bell so you get notifications there as well. And follow us on the socials, and stick with us as we come to you each and every week with news, interviews, great guests like Luis, and of course, lots of fun as well. Recommend us to your peers. We would appreciate that too. And with that, we won't see you next week, but we'll see you the week of July 16th. Yep. 12th. Is it the 12th? I'm looking at the wrong month. Yeah, the week of the 12th. I think that show will be out the 16th of July. So a couple of weeks from when you're listening to this one. But look forward to that. And of course, if you can join us in Atlanta next week or online, see you soon. Take care.